Master has come to bring a new way of looking at the universe, at life, at everything. Not that other people haven't had it too, but in some way he has managed to bring into every field of life this new understanding, which I can attest from my own experience. The skepticism, the intellectuality, the attempt to understand everything with the intellect. I had reached the point before I met him even of knowing that that would not give me what I was looking for. I knew that reason was a tricky tool at best. Science every few years is completely throwing out the window dogmas that it held for decades, even centuries. We have made a religion of science, and people tend to believe if science doesn't endorse a thing, it can't be true. I was reading an article just recently about skeptical answers to the question of near-death experience and how the scientists have managed to poo-poo every evident proof of death, of the near-death experience. For example, one woman during her near-death experience was out of the hospital and saw on a ledge outside her window a tennis shoe, which she couldn't see from inside the room. And the skeptics went and put a tennis shoe up there and then went down and saw they could see that tennis shoe. It's always, you'll find people with skeptical minds can find a way of poo-pooing everything. But I know from my experience that the heart is what guides you. First of all, seeing a tennis shoe up on the ledge in a high ledge in a window is the most unlikely thing in the world for anybody from the ground to observe. It seems like an absurd objection. But again and again, the objections people have raised, well, yeah, it's possible. Is it likely? No, it's not likely. And the worst of it is that skepticism, I know Master said, the doubter, he was quoting the Gita, the doubter is the most miserable of mortals. And I know because I've been through it myself. And I found that doubting, you can answer 1,000 doubts and still you'll come up with another 1,000. Answer those and you'll come up with another 1,000. And if it needn't be, therefore it mustn't be. This is the way the intellect works, but the soul works differently. And real understanding, somebody, in fact, it was my former college roommate who sent me an article yesterday by a friend of his talking about various trends in modern times. Absolute bilge. One thing I noticed was that he used these long words that nobody ever thinks of. He made the thoughts themselves so complex. Anybody who works too much with the intellect will confuse issues terribly. But when I met Master, then I began to understand. It's the heart that really understands. The heart has more understanding than the brain. The heart, as in Patanjali, he defined yoga as yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is the neutralization of the vortices of feeling. That is the real meaning of chitta, is feeling, not just lower aspects of consciousness, which many books will tell you. But your feeling arises from the heart. And it's here in the heart that intuition is perceived. Science says that you mustn't allow feeling to come into the picture. But it can never find the truth that way. There has been over, I would say thousands of years, although we don't know all the ancient history, but in all the history we do know, we know this much, that there has been one category of humanity that have stated the nature of truth and have never changed their minds on one word. In the Christian dogmatists have said that the Bhagavad Gita had to have been written since the times of Christ because it uses the same words that Christ does so often. Well, it isn't that Jesus borrowed from the Bhagavad Gita. It isn't that the Bhagavad Gita borrowed from Jesus. In fact, the Bhagavad Gita long antedates the birth of Jesus. But the truth is the truth. You don't have to learn it from a book. And all those who have had this perception and have seen truth as it is, they have never changed their minds. The same things that Krishna was saying, the same things the most ancient sages of India have said, these truths are being said by saints today. It's not as if new saints come up with new truths. If there is a new truth in spiritual teaching, you must hold it suspect, because truth is eternal. There is no way that you can create a new truth. So the teachings that Master brought us are on a deeper level than science can give us. And whether science, I know my dad said to me when he came, and he was very much opposed to my having come to Master. And when I came, when he saw me with a beard, he was just absolutely outraged. And I know that I had been staying out at the desert, and Master, when he heard that my parents were coming, he told me to go see them. But he said, we can't have you looking like that. He told me to grow a beard, but it was beginning to become a bit wild. And and so he had me sit in a chair and asked for some scissors and trimmed my beard himself. And ever since then, I've tried to keep it that length. But Dad said to me, if I were to get a few doctors to... My voice isn't in very good shape today. If I were to get a few doctors to rule on your what you're telling about energization, would you accept their testimony? I said, Dad, there are many doctors who follow these teachings and accept it completely. Well, there was nothing more he could say, but he probably thought they were too, just lost souls. There really is there's a dividing line, there's no coming together between skepticism and faith. And yet faith endorses the certainty of the soul. And when Master describes samadhi and other people describe their experiences of God, it's always the same. This infinite light, this infinite joy. St. Simeon, the new theologian, and he's called the new theologian because he came 1,000 years after Jesus. He lived more than 1,000 years before our time. So we can't really call him the new theologian, but that's his name. So St. Simeon, the new theologian, said that you have to take the truth from saints, and it should be the most recent saints because they have expressed themselves not in new ways, but in terms that we can understand, in terminology and words that we use today. But the ancient truths are still the same, and you find that the definitions given in the Upanishads, the definitions given by Jesus Christ. There was one Christian missionary, I forget his name, I think it was E. Stanley Jones, was attending a lecture by a Brahmin in New Delhi. And he couldn't rest quiet anymore, so he came up and made the mark of the cross on his forehead, and he said, now you're a Christian, now I can listen to you. Christian Smishtian. There is one truth, and it's not just Christian. There's one truth in the entire universe, and that is Sanatana Dharma, that everything has come from God. Everything must merge back into God. And how we merge basically has to be the same truth. There is no one who has ever said, my children, for a change, hate one another. Try to hurt one another. Get yours while you can. They've all taught basically the same things. They can't do differently. You can judge whether a person is speaking the truth by whether what his words, what he speaks, is endorsed by all the teachers who went before him. This is not true with science. Probably the most all-pervading and accepted truth of science is Darwin's evolution. Well, I pointed out in my book, Out of the Labyrinth, how he only shows the how of it. He doesn't show the why of it. He doesn't show the deeper truth of it. That I said, surely there's likely to be some kind of mechanism for it. But it isn't the truth. The truth is that there is a consciousness in everything that is constantly trying to understand more, to evolve to the understand where a point where it is more conscious. And we see all of evolution can be much better explained in terms of the push of consciousness upward to reclaim its state of perfect consciousness in God and in bliss. These are the truths. But even now, Darwinian evolution is under fire from many sources. So even the why of it is not, or the how of it, I mean, is not really completely accepted. And many other dogmas. I have an article here in a very interesting magazine called Atlantis Rising. And it speaks of certain dogmas in evolution, in the age of the earth. The article is called How Old is the Earth Really? And the dogma is that it's 4 or 5 billion years old. But there are certain things that he says here that are pretty interesting. First of all, there was a Tyrannosaurus Rex uncovered in Montana, and not very many years ago. They had to break the hip bone for a helicopter even to be able to lift it out of that area. And they discovered within that broken bone there was still some organic matter. Well, organic matter doesn't last that long. We shall see, but there are many other anomalies that unsettle the vision of a 4 to 5 billion years old planet with patient Colorado rivers and dinosaurs roaming 165 million years ago. Let me note a few of many. Helium levels of the atmosphere. On our planet, helium is produced by radioactive alpha decay. Radioactive elements in the rocks, for example, uranium and thorium, produce helium in this way, and it leaks into the air. Given the amount of helium in rocks and the rate of decay, one can extrapolate on the scale of the planet, and this gives 67 grams per second. There are roughly 3.71 billion tons of helium in the atmosphere. At 67 grams a second, it would require 2 million years to reach this amount. This is not 4.6 billion years. Who's right? At the current rate of decay is, in fact, slower than the earlier years of the planet, as the radioactive sources are drying up, so to speak. Is the helium simply escaping the atmosphere? But the probability of helium atoms achieving escape velocity from the Earth's field, too, can be calculated, and the amount escaping is only 1/40th the amount entering the atmosphere daily. Upper limit of the Earth's age given helium levels is 2 million years. That's quite a difference. Who's right? I don't know, but there's some very interesting thoughts here. The salinity of the oceans. While many processes bring salt into the sea, few allow the salt to escape. The salt builds steadily. Of course, it builds at a computable rate. Every kilogram of salt water contains about 10.8 grams of dissolved sodium, ion, Na+, by weight, giving about 1.47 times 1,016 tons of Na+ in the ocean. Some of this salt is supplied by rivers, and some directly by ocean floor springs and sediments. It is calculated that 4.57 million tons enter the sea per year, while the minimum possible rate in the past is 357 million tons. A later study in Nature magazine increases this 457 million figure. So we are talking conservatively. The exit rate of the salt is a maximum of 122 million tons per year, and the maximum in the past, 206 million tons. Given all this, the maximum age of the ocean is 62 million years, not actual age, but maximum age. Well, there are several other very interesting facts that I'm not going to read to you, but what I want to point out is that I just have become quite skeptical of what science tells me. You know, a very famous scientist in Germany said that a new scientific discovery gains acceptance not because it is logical, but because the old guard die and the new people are born with a sort of becoming accustomed to this thought. Scientists are human beings. Human beings are dogmatic. Scientists are dogmatic. You can't get away from that fact, and the scientists are constantly arguing against new things only to be knocked on the head sometime later, and time levels, eras become longer. Here they're becoming shorter, and I'm absolutely amazed by this article because it knocks on the head so many basic scientific theories. But remember, most of science is a theory. It is not a fact. And who cares? I mean, I'm perfectly happy for the world to be 2 billion, 5 billion. It doesn't matter to me. I've stopped counting after about 1,000. The point is that if you want to understand what life is about, I realized this when I was 13. I wanted to be an astronomer, and I worked at it for some time. I even had a mirror that I was grinding, and I worked at it for 6 months, and it was close to being finished, and it dropped off the table and chipped, and I was discouraged. But I came to think further about science, and I realized that what does it matter to me how many galaxies there are? What does it matter to me how old the universe is? What do most of scientists' scientific facts mean? What I want is inspiration, and I came to understand that truth hasn't anything to do with facts so much. It has to be factual, of course. But inspiration is what we need. And this is where the Guru comes in. He can bring to you that kind of understanding and that kind of inspiration which will help you to know God. And he can help you to overcome the most difficult thing of all to overcome, which is the ego. Because the ego is that which prevents us from seeking truth, from seeking anything but our own convenience. The ego gets in the way of our understanding things objectively. It isn't the feeling that gets in the way, it's the ego that gets in the way. Feeling, if it's upset and emotional, of course. I remember this friend of mine in college had a friend of his who was a professor of French, I think. His name was Jean. And he had an unusually small heart. And he took pride in this fact because he thought that meant he was objective. I don't take pride in that. I think that it's only when I've been able to expand my heart that I've been able to really understand. You can't understand other people even if you don't empathize with them. When I look at people now, I often almost feel like tears, like weeping, because they're so wonderful. They're all just trying as I'm trying for the same truth, which is bliss. And to me, even ordinary people, sometimes I find myself almost unable to bear the bliss of it, knowing that that's what they're looking for. I remember one time, because when I came to Master, I was intellectual and proud of my intellect, and I had a good brain, and I could out-reason most people, and find the flaws in just about everything, and I had reached the point where I knew that wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to get out of this intellect of mine, and I tried doing it until finally one day I woke up and found myself getting proud of my humility. And I thought, is there no cure for this thing? The more you try, the harder it gets. And then I remember one night I sat in my meditation room and I said, I'm so sick of this ego. And I said, get out! And I said it with all the force of at my command. And I came out from my meditation. I felt so free afterwards. And I came out from my meditation room, and Master was standing above the tennis courts looking out over Los Angeles. And so I came to him and knelt and took his blessing. And he tapped me on the head. He said, very good. He knew what I'd been going through. And then sometime later, he said that he said the trouble with too many of our ministers is that they let popular acclaim go to their heads. And I said, Master, that's why I don't want to be a minister. He told me I have to be. And I said again to him, that's why I don't want to be. And he looked down at the ground very seriously. He said, you will never fall from ego. You could say they'll never fall from it because I'm in it. I don't think that's what he meant, though. Because you don't fall from ego. So anyway, this ego is the greatest barrier. And this is why you need the help of a guru. Because I think I told this story to you on Monday, but it's well worth repeating. In any case, there's this man, Master told me this story, who was being bothered by a demon. And he read in the Vedas that there's a certain ceremony you can practice over some powder, and then you can throw the powder onto the demon, and the demon will be forced to disperse. So he took some powder and he chanted this mantra into the powder, and then threw it on the demon. And the demon laughed. He said, before you could even recite your mantra, I myself got into the powder. So Master was using this story, which may or may not be true, as an example of the ego. The very ego with which you are trying to dissolve the ego is already infected with the demon of egotism. And it's extremely difficult, like that experience of mine, trying to overcome it, trying to become humble and finding myself becoming proud of being humble. It's a joke, but it's a serious thing. You just can't break out of it as long as you're working from the ego. So there is only one solution. I found it before I met Master, actually, because I had been trying so hard to improve myself, to achieve some measure of perfection. And I found again and again that as I was working on one good quality, some bad quality would come up. It was hopeless. When I read Autobiography of a Yogi, I had reached the point where I knew I needed help. Sometimes people say to me, do I need a guru? If they say it belligerently, I say, no, you don't. But if you reach the point where you know that you need God, then you will have reached the point that you know you need a guru. There was this man, again, I think I may have told you this story on Monday, who a little boy came to him and asked him to accept him as his guru. And the guru took him down to a river and held his head under water. And after a while he let him up and he said, what did you want more than anything else? And the boy was spluttering, and finally he was able to say, air, air. And the guru said, when you want God like that, come to me. So this idea of a guru is something to be taken very seriously. Shankara said that it's the greatest blessing in the three worlds to have a God-known guru. And the question with us is that Master said he was the last guru, the last of the line of gurus. And many people have taken this to mean, well then, are we stuck? I'm probably the only person here, and certainly one of the very few people still living, who could have known him. I doubt that anybody here did know him. Does that mean that therefore you're all stuck out there, you poor slobs? It does not, and I want to make this point very clear. SRF insists that Master is the last guru. Well, let me give you a few facts on that score. First of all, I asked Master, must you have a guru, a living guru? He said, you must have met him at least once. So where does that leave you? I asked him, what about that man in Vrindavan whom he gave Kriya? Remember 2 penniless boys in Vrindavan? And Master said, inwardly he has kept in touch. So Master was aware of that. But he had that because when he said, you have to have had some contact. There was another thing that Master said. You can't find God until you have freed 6 others. He said, you have to free others. And I said, well, how many? He said, 6. This is a divine law. Now, if nobody in his work after his passing can find liberation because nobody can have a disciple, then what is the truth of his teaching? It's a false teaching. You have to accept it's either false, or if it's true, it's not true the way it's been understood. My understanding is that Master said he is the last of the line of gurus, but not the last in the line of gurus. And that's a big difference. In other words, like Jesus Christ, he is the one who brought this message. And he was an avatar. And what is an avatar? An avatar is, well, first there is the stage of Jivanmukta. He said it in the first Kriya that I was at. He said, of those present, there will be a few siddhas and quite a few Jivanmuktas. A Jivanmukta is one who has overcome all his past karma. He has to go beyond even Sabhikalpa Samadhi, because in that state, even though you've become one with God, when you come out of your meditation, you remember your ego. You remember that you were John Doe who became infinite, became him John Doe again. In Nirbhikalpa Samadhi, you've completely slain the concept of ego. Now, is there any sense of separateness once you are one with God? No, there is no sense. When you are one with God, you are God. This vast universe, you are that. How can this little ego become one with that? By having all sense of separation and ego cut away. When you have, I've used the illustration of the lake. When it's frozen, you couldn't break through that thing with machinery. But if you go at one little point and drill just with one little point in that lake, in that ice, you can get through into the water underneath it. And then with the water of divine love, you can melt the rest of that ice flow. And so if you can go down into your own ego to that point where, as there is one technique taught in the Gita, Master said it's not the highest, but it's an important technique. Ask yourself, who am I? Then who is asking this question, who am I? And who's asking the question, who's asking the question? And you go back and back and back until you find yourself watching yourself. And gradually, Ramana Maharshi taught that. And it's a valid way. It's not the highest way, but it's one way taught in the Bhagavad Gita. You go beyond your ego into that water. You drill at that single point. Science can never give you that truth. It can only show you objectively, but it will still be the ego looking at that objective truth. You have to go back to the source. Truth is center everywhere, circumference nowhere. And when you have gone into the center of your own being and realized that you are that, that becomes infinite. To know yourself completely is to know God. And in that state, then, do you forget who you were? This is the beauty of it. Nothing in God is ever lost. And so what you keep is the memory of having been John Doe or Betty Phillips or whatever it might be. You remember that you were that person who for many, many incarnations traveled through all those bodies and experiences and so on until finally it awoke and realized that it was the infinite. And so that memory is what the Jivan Mukta has to work with. He's free from ego, but he's not free from the memory that he, as, became a pirate or a businessman or all the infinite number of things that people can do, male and female. And so he remembers, but he must go through those memories and see that it was God who played all those roles. And you can go through the state, you can remain in the state of Jivan Mukta, which means literally free while living. So you have no ego, but you may come back to this world many times. I said to Master once you're in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, can't you just say it's all a dream? He said, yes, you can, but most people prefer not to. They use this as an excuse to come back and help their disciples. Well, you remember that you were all those things, but when you were free from it, you see that it was God who played that role. God plays the whole universe. In this article I was reading yesterday that this friend of mine, this former roommate of mine, sent me, it spoke about monotheism as being an untruth. He doesn't understand anything. There's no monotheism unless you want to take it as that God is everything. And that no longer is monotheistic, it just is. Pantheism is a better expression for it. Pan means everything in Greek. And God became everything. And everything is a manifestation of him. This ground that we're sitting on, this chair, which I hope isn't getting too hard for you, it has no hardness at all. It's only energy. It's a vibration of energy. And energy is a vibration of thoughts. And science itself is sort of, some scientists have begun to suspect that maybe those thoughts are only consciousness. The reality of everything is consciousness. Science will never reach that point. Yoga does. Yoga is the spiritual science, and it tells the truth. However, now, once you have reached that point, where you have overcome all those past memories of having been anybody, and you see it was God who played the whole show, did everything, then you become a siddha, perfected being, or supreme mukta. And the idea here is that you see that it was God who became you and became himself again. And so you still don't lose the memory, because in omniscience there has to be that memory too. And so even though you're completely free, and when Master said there will be a few siddhas, that meant there will be a few people among his disciples who are completely liberated, who, when they attain that state, then they still remember having been this person, but they remember that it was God who was that person. But those people usually, when they've reached this absolute bliss of Satchidananda, who would want to come back? I mean, when you've reached perfection, most people say, thank God I'm out of it. Very few people come back. Those who do come back with full divine power, and they are called avatars. You hear the word avatar thrown around ridiculously. So-and-so in his avatar of Wall Street banker was... that's not the meaning of avatar. Avatar, they've corrupted it. They think of a financial guru, for example. A guru has to be one who lifts you up from the level of ego into divine consciousness. And so an avatar is one who has come down. God has incarnated in this world. The reason, and he has come as Jesus Christ. Yes, Jesus was divine. They sell him short by thinking he was divine as a little body. He was divine because he was one with the infinite. And when somebody said to him once, good man, he said, why do you call me good? There is none good save God. So what he was saying is that the infinite is what he was expressing. His little body, that's not what you can't call a human being even good, because all goodness comes from God. He was a human being, but he came to manifest the Christ consciousness which is everywhere. He was an avatar. A very interesting story is the story of his birth at Bethlehem, and the star that the wise men followed. They followed it eastward. But In fact, they were coming from the east. How would they follow it eastward to come west? There are certain little subtle hints there. If people would pay attention, what they were really seeing was the star in the spiritual eye. The outer ring of the spiritual eye is the golden ring representing the astral world. The blue inside is the Christ consciousness representing the causal world. And the star in the center represents the consciousness of God Himself. And we are a manifestation of that to a larger extent than most people can imagine. The spiritual eye is really a reflection of the medulla oblongata. The ego is centered in the medulla, and that's why when people flatter you, you say, you feel good. Or when you see a rock star, all his ego is here. When a person becomes enlightened, he feels his self-consciousness centered here. So when you look at the spiritual eye, or you look at this area of the spiritual eye, where do you look from? Do you look downward from the brain, upward from the body? No, you should be concentrated in the medulla, looking from that point toward the spiritual eye. And the more you become absorbed in that, the more you begin to realize that that is where your center of consciousness is. A master is like a human being, a normal human being, but everything he does, here is where his sense of self is. And the more deep you go on the path, the more you feel yourself becoming centered here. You'll first of all feel a lot of joy and a lot of love here, and gradually you'll feel yourself drawn up here. The more drawn you become, the less ego consciousness you have. And we need, we need to completely become centered there. Then a channel opens up to the top of the head. And they say that an enlightened soul goes out through the top of his head. Sometimes they'll even see a break in the skull here, to indicate that the soul has escaped from that point. But you can't reach this point except through the spiritual eye. So the truth of it is that this is the seventh chakra, but this masquerades as the seventh chakra temporarily until you've completely brought your sense of self here, and then you direct it upward toward the spiritual eye. Now, when an avatar comes into this world, he comes with the full power of God. A Jivan Mukta, one who's still trying to rise, he doesn't have that full power. But all these true avatars who have come have the power. Jesus has the power even now to save people, to resurrect them from delusion into wisdom. Rama has that power now. When they chant the name of Rama and Krishna and Jesus and all the great avatars, they are chanting a truth. Those men are not dead. They are alive right now, and their power is right now. And it is very different from a saint who has achieved God and has that sense of oneness with Him, but hasn't that divine power. Jesus had that divine power, and the only great mistake that people make is the thought that mine is the only way. And you find that this is so everywhere. Everybody thinks his own is the best way. When I was a child, my father gave my brother Bob and me 2 presents. And each of us was arguing as to which was the best. His own, of course, was the best. Then my father came back and said, "No, you've got it wrong. I meant this one for you, that one." And so suddenly we switched our allegiance, and this was still the best. We did it in fun. But in fact, some people do it in dead earnest and kill each other because they think that, if the goal of life were to reach the equator, those north of the equator would be told to go south. Those south of the equator would be told to go north. And human nature being what it is, it never knows when to stop. And so it keeps going after it reaches the equator. And so you can imagine some people down in the south meeting people determinedly coming north and saying, no, you're supposed to go south. No, we're supposed to go north. And so they come to blows. Well, all they're supposed to do is reach the equator. The truth is one, and it's central in ourselves. What Jesus came when he said that his is the only way. It is the only way. Sanatana Dharma is the only way. The only way to know God and to be saved is to become one with him, to become one with his consciousness. But God did not punish the rest of mankind by giving mankind his only incarnation in this little tiny corner of this world, leaving the rest of people, now that we know how old and older the world is, the thought that he waited thousands and thousands of years before even coming and telling them how they could be saved is just unthinkable. It's ridiculous. Yes, Jesus is the only way because he represented the only way, but that only way has been taught word for word practically, and that's why they, Christian missionaries in India, thought the Bhagavad Gita had to have been borrowed from the Bible because it was teaching so many of the same truths. But truth is one and eternal, and that avatar has come again and again into this world, and it is each time a special soul. Jesus wasn't an abstract manifestation of God. He was that soul who had been through all the troubles. He knew what we go through. He understood it from experience. It says in the book of Revelation, all those who, I forget the exact wording, but who overcome, I will make a pillar in the temple of my God. I think he says, even as I overcame and am set down with him. These are truths that he stated again and again. And in the Indian scriptures, where they have had much more sophistication, because they've had thousands of years of spiritual civilization, they've been able to clarify these things, and even so they get it wrong. And it has been necessary again and again. This is why it says in the Bhagavad Gita, whenever virtue declines and vice is predominant, is in the ascendancy, I myself incarnate in this world to bring truth back to people, to put virtue in its place, and to punish evil. And this has been the role of avatars also, as opposed to saints, that they have had to punish evil. Jesus drove those money changers out of the world, out of the temple. When you read about Jesus, gentle Jesus, sweet and mild, you put that together with his driving out the money changers, it doesn't work. When he called the Pharisees thieves and robbers, it doesn't work. When he stood up to them and outraged them so much that they were ready to stone him to death, it doesn't work to speak of him as gentle and mild. An avatar comes to challenge people much more than an ordinary saint. He comes to tell them, look, wake up! This is what you're about, what life is about. And this is what each individual, once he really knows that he wants God, he must understand the need for a guru. Because at that point, if you think you're going to get there on your own, you'll still be wandering a long time from now, because the ego won't let go of you. The ego will hold you down. It'll give you all sorts of false reasoning to persuade you, well, what are we going to do about that subject? Here, our guru has left his body. I have to say this, that when Daya went to India, she was determined on this dogma that Master was the last of the line of gurus, the last guru. I have to say, if that's the case, then Master's teaching is false. Because he told me that everybody has to free at least 6 others. And if he frees 6 others, he has to be their guru. And therefore it cannot be true that there will be no other saints. Or if there are, as I said, then his teaching is false. But that's not what he said. Daya, when she saw that the Sikhs have they call their guru the Guru Granth Sahib, she leaped on this and said, Master's lessons are the guru. And he said his lessons would be the guru. Master told me personally, no written thing can be the guru. You can challenge scripture, and it won't be able to answer you. You challenge a guru, he can answer you. You challenge a person who knows God, he can tell you the truth. You can't get that from the Bible alone. This is the great mistake in Protestantism, that they thought all they needed to do was go to the Bible. But in the time of Luther himself, who promoted that thought, he got into a big debate at the Marlburg Colloquy with Zwingli, who also created Protestantism in Switzerland. And they couldn't agree on a certain basic scriptural point. Well, if these proponents of this idea say it's all there and they can't find the answer there, that shows that you cannot get it from a scripture. Master never said the lessons would be the guru. He said that they will teach, yes. But the teaching has to come from individuals. It has to come from me. It has to come from those who have lived it for many years. So what am I saying here? I'm saying that if his word is true, if there is a need for a living guru, if there is the fact that he's launched a teaching that would endure for thousands of years, if they would find God, it means that somebody's got to be living in the work. They can't go out to some other guru to find it and then decide that the SRF teachings are a good way, but they get their contact with God through some other source. It doesn't make any sense. The only possible solution, and this is what I am certain Masters meant, was that he was the last of the line of gurus, because they were the avatars. As Jesus is still worshipped today, people still have visions of Jesus today. There was one man who had been a monk for many years, and when he met Master, he had this feeling that Master could help him, and he prayed to him to be shown a vision of Jesus. And he came to Master the next day and he said, I have seen him. These are true things. People do have visions, and those visions are life-changing. But Jesus, although he's still active and still able to bless and guide people, still there is this story of Namdev, the saint that I talk about in this new book, by the way, The New Path. It's just come out. Please get it. It's a very good book, if I do say so myself. Anyway, in this story, I met one man, and Master told me Ramana Maharshi wasn't yet liberated. He was a Jivan Mukta. I had asked him, he said of those saints in the autobiography, the only ones who were completely liberated were Babaji, Lahiri Mahashai, Sri Yukteswar. He didn't speak of himself on that occasion, but other times he did. Ananda, the saint with two bodies, and Ram Gopal Mujumdar, the sleepless saint. And I grilled him on this. I said, what about the levitating saint? What about Teresa Neumann, who Master said was an incarnation of Mary Magdalene? What about this one and that one? No, not yet. They're still Jivan Mukta. Mind you, that when you've reached the state of Jivan Mukta, you're as good as anybody, because you're one with God. You just have these memories to overcome, but you don't have the same power to help people as an avatar, but you have the same realization. There cannot be grades of realization of oneness. There is oneness with God, what the Christian saints have described as a spiritual marriage. When you attain this spiritual marriage and become one with Him, no one is higher than another. They don't speak that way. Jesus himself, when somebody wanted her son to be sitting at his right and left hand, Jesus said, you don't know what you're talking about. The truth is that when you have attained God, you are one with Him. There's no throne to sit on. There's no astral world. It's just oneness with that infinite. And you are in absolute bliss, Satchidananda. Well, anyway, within this pattern, there are certain works which, for example, in India, people try to find a guru. Among Sikhs, I have taught in Punjab, and I have found that Sikhs, even though they call their Guru Granth Sahib the Guru, it is not understood that way really. It has a certain reverence. But Sikhs today go to seek their gurus. And I imagine that's always been the case. Whether it is or not, this is the truth that I am telling you. You need a guru. You need a living guru. You don't need to have him with you. You don't need to be with him all the time. But there must be that one physical contact. There must be that one soul contact while the Master is living. And that leaves all of you out if you don't take into account that his disciples also would become his channels. He said, it says in the Bible that at this time Jesus did not initiate people personally. He initiated them through the disciples. And this is true in Master's time. Master had me initiate somebody when he was living. And this was a rather frightening thing for me, because he asked me to do this when I was only 22. I hadn't been with him more than 8 months. And he had me, I remember Bernard came into my room on Saturday morning. I had known that Master was to speak on Sunday, because it was my job to send out the notices to the churches. And I knew that he had not talked for 2 months in San Diego, and that finally he was to speak there this next Sunday. Saturday, the day before, Bernard came into my room and said, Master can't go, he wants you to go in his place. Well, he could have asked a lot of other people, but he asked me. And after that, I had to give a Kriya initiation to somebody. I'd only attended one initiation. I'd never spoken in public in my life. I was horrified. And I had 12 hours to really get ready for this thing. So I took the bus down to Encinitas, and I had Brother Ananda teach me the ceremony of the Kriya and tell me a little bit about what to do. In those days, they had the curtains closed, and you were up on the platform, and the curtains were closed until the moment the service began, then the curtains opened. So I could hear all this mumbling outside. But when the curtain opened, my God, the church was full. There were people looking in the window. There was standing room around they showed their spirituality by none of them leaving. But I didn't get nervous because I was thinking, those poor people, they've expected to see their guru and they see this 22-year-old in his place. I've never been nervous because I've always thought in terms of people's needs rather than my own. But the truth is that Master pushed me into the public, and in a rather rude way, you might say, like a baby bird being pushed out of its nest. From then on, he had me teaching, and he made me a minister, really before I had even been with him a year. And he put me in charge of the monks after I'd been with him not even a year. And he did this to other disciples, but he said that this is our role, to transmit. He said, when you speak to people, don't give them just your ideas, don't give them just words, give them your vibrations. He had me standing outside the church very soon after I came there to shake hands with people. Well, I was just this young chick, I didn't know anything, but everybody was drawing from me because they felt I was representing him. And I said to Master, don't ask me to do that again, sir, it's just I feel completely drained by it. He said, that's because you're thinking of yourself. Think of God, and his power will flow through you. And I found that was true. The more I thought of God, the more energized I felt by giving. You know, the magnetism and energy are part of this new age. They are, before electricity was discovered, you couldn't really talk about magnetism. You couldn't talk about energy. Now, my grandniece tells me that energy is the word she hears all the time. We're in an age of energy. It's now possible to teach this yoga science in its deeper sense because its deeper aspect deals with the energy of the body. Anyway, in the meeting of the Guru, in the transfer from the Guru, my Guru gave me this, he gave it to other teachers, and it is our role, and it will be a role that we pass on. And it is like this, and this is the truth, that contact with me or with Jyotish or Devi, it will make you that, and someday many of you will become that contact. And don't think of it, you're the Guru, because Master also never thought of himself as the Guru. He said, I am not the Guru, God is the Guru. And when I met Swami Muktananda, he did his best to get me as a disciple. And his translator said to me, your own guru said he's not the guru. He didn't understand. He was a lower saint. He had lots of things still to overcome. Among them, and chief among them, was ego. Anyway, when Master said, I'm not the guru, God is the guru, God had to work through. As in that story of Namdev, he could see Krishna. Krishna would talk to him. But when he showed that he had a flaw, and he asked Krishna to help him, Krishna said, I can't do that directly. I can inspire. I can uplift. But for the touch of God, that has to come through a human channel. And so he met this guru, and it talks about that story in the New Path. It's a very interesting story, and it was told to me by the one man that Master said is fully liberated, that he knew in India. None of the others were completely liberated. I asked him about Sri Aurobindo, Ramana Maharshi, all these others, Ananda Mohiman, many others. He said, not yet. That doesn't mean they're lesser. It just means they haven't that complete power. But one person, he told me, had been fully liberated, and that was Sri Rama Yogi, who was the disciple of Ramana Maharshi. And Paul Brunton mentions him in his book, A Search in Secret India, as Yogi Ramya. And Master said when he met, and there's a marvelous photo. I don't know why SRF thinks it's serving Master by keeping all these photos under lock and key. Master is standing there with his arm out, and Yogi Ramya is sort of, wow. And Master said they walked around the ashram there for a half hour. He's for a long time. He didn't say how long. He said if I'd spent another half hour in his company, I could never have brought myself to leave India again. I met him and I spent 4 days with him, and it was a great blessing. But he's the one who told me this story. And he said Krishna said to him, to Namdev, that if you want to be free, then you must find a guru. And this guru that he was sent to, because Namdev said, well, then please at least tell me where I can find my guru. He said, well, go to such and such a village and look for such and such a person. He will be your guru. So he went to the village, and he asked the villagers how to find him. Oh, that crazy man, who would ever want to see him? And he said, well, if you want to see him, he's probably hanging around the temple. That's where he usually stays. So he went up to the temple, and he didn't see anybody in the courtyard. He went inside. The temple was empty, but there was one man lying flat on his back, an old man with his feet on a Shiva lingam. And this was outrageous. I mean, what could be in India? The foot is the lowest part. You never sit in a room with your feet pointing towards somebody. It's a sign of disrespect. You have to tuck them in. Remember that if you go to India. And the man was with his feet on a Shiva lingam. This was the worst insult you can imagine. And he said, what are you doing with your foot on that lingam? And the man said, well, do you see, my son, I'm very old. If you feel that my feet shouldn't be there, move them to where there isn't a lingam. So he moved them hastily, and just as he was about to put them down, there was another lingam. And he moved it again, another lingam. Finally, he understood what he was being taught, that God is everywhere. You can't isolate him with a little murti. Idol worship is not, as most people think in the West, it's not worshipping the image. It's worshipping the symbol, the representation of that image, in the same way that we worship Jesus on the cross. You know that he's not on that cross, but you worship remembering what it represents. So this is true for all idols, so-called, in India. They aren't idols. They are images. They are symbols. And so, anyway, then he understood, and he prostrated before this man, and the man stood up straight and strong and gave him this touch of divine. And later on, Namdev was wandering the country and seeing God everywhere and in everything, and just in absolute bliss. And one day he happened to be near the temple where he used to worship Krishna, and he appeared in the temple, and the image took life and said to him, as Jesus has sometimes spoken, as he spoke to St. Francis from the cross. And he spoke to him He said, "My son, I've been missing you. Where have you been all this time?" And Namdev said, "Well, how could I think to come here when everywhere I look, I see you?" And Krishna said, "Now there are no cracks in that pot." That's, I didn't tell you the first of the story, but there was another saint in the village who was also a saintly man. And there was a big convocation of these different people, and this other saint was a potter by profession. So, reflective of that trade, he went around slapping everybody. And everybody had so much respect for him, they just accepted it. But when he came to Namdev, Namdev had many followers there too. And he slapped him too. And Namdev, "Why do you do that?" And the man calmly stood up. He said, "There appears to be a crack in this pot." And that's when he went to Krishna and asked him for his help. And then when Krishna said, "And now there are no cracks in that pot," that's what he meant. This is the state that all of us must attain. I met a Monsignor in Italy who had come to talk with me. And I had written an article saying certain things that the Catholic Church just doesn't know, and he was trying to defend it. And I answered him very well. And finally, when I said, his idea of perfection was when you go to heaven and you live there, and you're just as good as any saint at that point. Well, sure, we're all as good as anybody else. Nobody is less than anyone else because they're all manifestations of God. But there's some people who know it, and they deserve a reverence that those who don't know it don't deserve. Because you need the company of the saints. One moment in the company of a saint will be your raft over the ocean of delusion. That influence is what is changing. You know, when you shake hands with people, I mentioned this earlier, the top of the body is a horseshoe magnet, and so is the lower part. When you meet with the hands, the lower part has a magnetism in the upper part. And that's why when I was shaking hands with those people outside of church and they were all drawing from me, I felt so exhausted until Master said that think of God, let His power flow through you. Well, this is what a guru does. It never, if it's ego consciousness, it's false, it's wrong. But if he acts as a channel for God, then he can help people. And there will be people in Master's work, and there are people in Master's work who are an inspiration. Dayamata says, "I don't presume to bless." So she stands in front of you like this. She's blessing when people take it as a blessing, even if she doesn't touch them. But that's an absurdity. Master wanted us to bless people. He told me that. And we must understand then that the power of the Guru will flow through his disciples. And I have seen this to be a truth in those people who say, "Well, I'm just going to Master. I'm not going to go to any intermediary." I have never seen a glow in those people. They need that contact. People who have come to SRF, people who have come to Ananda, they receive a contact that they don't get if they think to get it only on their own. And this is also true in Christianity. Don't think that just any preacher is going to give it to you, but those who feel the presence of God, those who have deep devotion to Jesus, those who try to transmit His consciousness to people, they can. And the path, just as a relay race, you pass the baton from one person to another. So spirituality has to be passed on from person to person. This is why God has to come back into this world again and again. Jesus said to all those, he didn't say it, it's in the first chapter of the Gospel of St. John about him, to all those who received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God. Now, receiving Christ doesn't mean what it was considered to mean for centuries. Credo, I believe. And it's enough to believe in Christ. Torquemada believed in Christ. Do you think he went to heaven? He killed so many people by torture. Many people in the name of Christ have committed terrible atrocities. Do you think they're all going to heaven because they believe in Christ? It's not enough to believe. People believed that the world was flat. That didn't make it flat. Belief is one thing. I can believe in you. But I cannot say I have faith in you until you've proved yourself to me. When I've seen your friendship, for example, tested under severe circumstances, then I can say I have faith in you. When I know that this truth really can change my life, I can never lose that. Faith is something real. St. Paul said faith is the proof of things unseen. Belief doesn't prove anything. The world was flat and people thought the world was flat. It isn't. People believed the world was the center of the universe. It isn't. Time after time, people's beliefs have been proved to be wrong. But what they've understood through faith, that is to say through a direct experience, that they know, and that will never be shaken. And this is the beauty of spiritual faith, that when you've experienced it, no one can shake you. No doubts can overcome you. You know, because as like that beautiful story of St. Anthony of the desert, he meditated in the desert for many, many years, and he kept saying, reveal thyself, reveal thyself. And after many years, finally, Satan did his best to catch him, control him, and he materialized figures from the friezes on the wall to become devouring animals to eat him up. And he just one more time cried out to Jesus, and all of a sudden Jesus appeared, and all Satan's minions disappeared. And he said to Jesus, where have you been all these years that I've been calling you? And Jesus said, I have always been with you. Jesus said, I will always be with you. You must understand that time in that realm is not real. Jesus is everything that the Bible claims. Christians have sold him short. He is much more than people think he is. He is the consciousness of infinity. One time, Master received a letter in Boston from somebody who said he was wrong promoting Jesus Christ in this country, because he said, don't you know Jesus was just a myth? He never lived. Master prayed to be shown this man. And about a week later, he saw this man sitting in the public library when he went in. He was sitting on a bench there under a window. Master went over and sat next to him. He said, why did you write me that letter? The man said, what letter? He hadn't signed his name. The one in which you told me that Jesus Christ was a fraud. He never lived. He was a myth. Man said, how did you know about it? Master said, never mind, but the power that enabled me to find you enables me to say that he did live and that he is everything great that the Bible says about him. He is greater than people understand because he is one with God himself. He is here right now. He's in your heart right now. And the power of the Guru is that you can't get out of your ego by your own little self-effort. It just doesn't work. The ego is too full of delusion. But if you bring that consciousness into all those who received him by experience, not by belief, when they've received him by actual contact with him, because he's eternally here. He's not somebody who lived 2,000 years ago. He's not somebody who died in 1952. He's not somebody who died with Krishna before the beginnings of Kali Yuga. He's not Rama and all that. He's everything. And when you receive that, then he gives you the power to become a son of God. We are sons of God, but more or less by proxy, because we don't really understand it and we can't understand it. We see ourselves just as this little ego. But the time must come when you wake up from this dream and realize that it was he who became you. And when you achieve that state, then you will be able to realize that you are a child of God, really. To become a son of God is to become God, because the Son of God is omnipresent. The truth of it is, many people think the Hindu Trinity means Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. No, not at all. Those are three aspects of Om, the cosmic vibration. The three aspects of Spirit are God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Ghost. The Holy Ghost, ghost means gast, breath. And That is as it says in the book of Genesis, where his wind blew over the ocean and created the waves, which meant the waves of manifestation. Everything in existence exists as a wave of vibration. You are just a vibration. Your thoughts are just vibrations. You have to go beyond vibration to know the Spirit. And so God, when He chose to manifest this universe, and I've been asked the question, why did God create the universe? Sri Yukteswar said, leave a few questions to be answered in the infinite. But I have an answer to that too. I think it's the nature of Satchidananda to want to express itself. And that it's the nature of Satchidananda to want to be creative and to manifest this universe. We have been born of that bliss. And our duty, implanted in our very souls, is to seek that bliss in everything. And we make mistakes again and again, but finally we understand that where we will find that bliss is inside, never outside. Heaven is only a byway station, a halfway station. You have to go beyond heaven. You have to go beyond the thought that God is limited. You have to go to infinity. And so God creating this universe, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Most people think the Word means the Bible. Could there have been a Bible before there were books to write in? Could there have been a Bible before there was human tongue to express words? No, the Word means the vibration. When you speak, your words are the vibrations of your thoughts. And so we can say the vibration of the universe, that which produced all manifested existence, is a manifestation of the Spirit moving. He created Om. So God became the moving particle, every vibrant atom in the universe. But at the heart of everything, because everything has to be God ultimately, so at the heart of every moving atom, at the heart of every vibration, there is that still point, which is a reflection of the infinite in the particular. You too have that reflection in you, but you have to realize it. But the Son is what Jesus was. He was one with the Son. I asked Master, what should one be in order to reach that state of being called a Master? He said, you must have attained at least Christ consciousness. Oneness with the Son. To become the sons of God means to become one with God. The Son is that aspect of the God which reflects God in creation. So you see that the Bible, and I've only touched on many, many statements that indicate that Jesus was absolutely at one with this teaching. But you do need the help of someone who has that state or is higher than your state. Always seek good company, because your company creates an exchange of vibration. And the people with whom you mix will determine to a large extent your own consciousness. You know, there's a very interesting picture of me here. In my early years, I look quite innocent, but when I'm in college and there's a picture of me with Rod. And you see that I've been pulled down by his consciousness. He was very intelligent, very eloquent, very everything except good. And I don't mean he was bad. I mean, however, that he was very worldly. And I became worldly, and it took me quite a while to shake that off. The company you keep is extremely important. When you eat in a restaurant, you're in a taking mode, and you absorb the vibrations around you. So make sure that you go with other friends who are either don't go to a restaurant or eat with your own friends who keep your vibration intact. You must preserve that and mix with people who uplift you, not with people who pull you down. They are false friends. He alone is a true friend who helps you to become what you really want to become. Don't say, well, I've known him for years, therefore he's a friend. He is your true friend who uplifts you. He is your enemy who pulls you down. But the final and best friend of all is the Guru. And his only interest, as I saw with my Guru, his only interest was to help us. He didn't want anything from us. He hadn't come here for anything we could give him. But what he wants from you is your own self-realization. And what those who are his true disciples want is only your realization. And Ananda itself is not here for what it can get. It's here for what it can give. But remember, yes, you do need a guru. You need a living guru, and you need that contact with Master through that living guru. So when you come to people who represent him, feel that it's him that they are representing, not themselves. They should feel that way too. But to the extent that you're able to draw Master through them, to that extent will Master be able to help you. And his is the power behind this work. And he said that Jesus was also a part of that power. Our line of gurus is Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Kriyananda, Paramhansa Yogananda. And that was the end of that line, just as Jesus was the end of his line. He didn't talk about a prior line, but there was that line. When the three wise men came, well, I'm not going to go in that story. It's a very interesting story, but I don't have the time. So, what you must understand is that to the extent that we can represent him, to that extent we can help you. To the extent that you can feel his power flowing through us, to that extent he can help you. But don't think you can get there on your own. You can't. No one can. Everybody who has ever found God has not found him in a vacuum. He's found him through right contact. And you will find that the Christian saints either were already born highly enough evolved not to need a guru, or that they had gurus but didn't talk about it. Okay, I'm afraid my time is at an end. I could go on and on, but